Hey guys, I'm Dan and welcome back for another episode breakdown. This is the more long form breakdown with Easter eggs and spoilers. So if you don't want anything spoiled that has to do with the first 4 episodes of the Wheel of Time, or for anything out of the Wheel of Time book series, up to include a new spring and some of the additional material, then I suggest you click that like, subscribe, and bell icon right now so that you can come back to this later and then go watch and or read. If you've already done those things or you don't care about spoilers, hey, stick around and let's have a good time. Alright, so episode 4. I'm going to do this a little bit different than I have in the past. I'm not going to go into each and every little scene. I did a lot of them in the earlier breakdown that was spoiler free. I'm going to hit on the highlights from this episode that I really liked and some of the kind of Easter eggs and spoiler stuff. Let's start off with that first scene. Wow, Gildon is burning. What a great way to open. I mean, just looking at the castles and the fortifications are just burning. They have that open wide pan shot. Great way to open up the episode. All right, so the first scene I really want to talk about is that first scene where Logan is catching up to the king's guards who have let the king go ahead of them, and they get ready to throw their spears. You can see that he's already channeling the one power. However, it definitely looks different than when the Aes Sedai do it, where they have a nice white, clean power. This one has this kind of inky black sludge on it. The showrunner Rafe Judkins says that this is the corruption. Those of us who've read the books, we know that by a different name. Obvious reasons for that particular change. So this is the Dark One's corruption on the one power that you see. And it's funny because you can, as he's channeling, you can see the tips of the one power are still white as that corruption is kind of catching up to the weave and is kind of coating over it. So it's still basically kind of a clean power, but that corruption is there too. It's really interesting visually to see that it's not just black all the time or completely corrupted. You know, it's still the one power, just there is that Dark One's corruption laying over it. Additionally, another thing that I noticed here is, unlike we've seen with the Aes Sedai so far, he's able to channel pretty quick. And I have a slight theory on this, because you notice it with the females later on in this episode as well. If you're already embracing the power, you can do quick reaction things like throw up a shield of air to stop lances coming at you. So I think that that's part of how they're showing this, because if you remember in episode 1, Moraine is doing a lot of build up and hand waving and going back and all this stuff, which visually was really cool looking. But at the same time, I was like, that doesn't really seem like they do in the books. In the books, a lot of it is like almost instantaneous. So it was good to see some of that instantaneous channeling, but it does look like drawing the power to do it is what takes time. So if you've already drawn a bunch of the power into yourself, then you can go ahead and do some quick channeling, some quick weaves. I thought that was a really cool, interesting touch. So for the next part that I want to talk about, oh man, I love the mixture of visual effects in this. We saw it kind of with the Trollocs and the Fade, where occasionally, sometimes they wouldn't do enough either digitally or they would do too much digital and it would look a little wonky. CGI effects when they're overdone look bad. Sometimes straight up practical effects in the wrong lighting look kind of bad too. And you don't get the facial expression. But I do like the fact they're trying to mirror them up, and those times where it hasn't looked well has been very few. One of the times when something looked amazing is in the scene with the King of Gildon with that open wound on his shoulder. Oh my goodness, it looks great. Explicit content warning for people who don't like gory things. I'm about to throw it on the screen. Take a look at this thing right here. Oh my goodness, that is beautiful makeup. I mean, that is clearly a practical effect, but the way that they show depth between where the cut is and where the skin is kind of detached almost, really showing the arm is, pretty much rendered useless just about, or should be from that kind of wound. It's just really good detail. And I love the way they did it. And just, hats off to that visual effects team, because that is a stunning representation. So the rest of that scene closes up with Logan kind of recruiting the king. He heals him. You do see a couple little things of a couple people over his shoulders. Interesting note, the female over his shoulder is named Alusha. The male doesn't have a name. So interesting there that they didn't name that character. They named the Alusha character. Just one of the interesting little facts that I saw that I thought was interesting and maybe of note later. Who knows? But now let's get on to the next scene, which is the Aes Sedai camp. And right off the bat, as Nynaeve comes up over the hill and you see the Aes Sedai camp, you got to notice one thing. This is a small Easter egg that they had in there. There's like 3 green Aes Sedai tents right there, but only 1 red Aja. And that's despite the fact that I think they both have 4 of each Aja there. But looks like the green all have their own tents. Of course, they have their warders with them, but the reds all share one. It was just an interesting thing there that I noticed that I think is really true to how the Ajas probably would, travel. The next thing is that scene was showing all 4 of the red sisters sitting there. I know we saw that in promotional footage, but seeing it live on screen there and seeing them kind of pan out again just still gives me chills, especially as a guy. They have this we are everything kind of clicky catty mentality that you can just see coming out of them, that they are looking down on everyone else, including the Green Sisters. So wonderful on that. Another quick note of something that was very, very interesting that I noticed was Land's the sheath that Land puts his sword in on his back. It has an extra, take a look up there, it has an extra little peg so that his sword, which has these little quillins on it that are shaped like this but have openings, he can throw it on there and twist it and lock it in place. And that's for when he needs to ride fast on a horse or has to run through the woods, and to make sure that it's not sliding around or accidentally slipping out if he's bending over. So that's a great little attention to detail there. That was just super. I didn't expect it, and when I saw it, I was like, "What is that?" And had to go back and look again. Additionally, because it does take what would be straight up on your back and push it at an angle this way, it would also make drawing it easier, because it's easier to do this than this. It's easier to have that angle. So there was 2 little things there that I was like, "Huh, that's really cool and interesting. Good job, showrunners." So we go and see in the tent that Kareen Sedai is there healing Moraine. Quick note, I know that in my spoiler-free breakdown, I said I don't remember Kareen Sedai from the books. Maybe she's not in there. She is, my bad, primarily in the New Spring. She's actually the Captain General of the Green Aja then. So, my bad on there. She is there. Just the name didn't perk up the memory for me. That being said, she heals Moraine. Here's the interesting thing. Immediately after that, even though Moraine's like, "Hey, you've held back armies. Healing me shouldn't harm you," she explains that they're having to take turns shielding the false dragon, Logan. Moraine's just like, "I need to meet him." There's no like, "Hey, get me bread. Hey, give me some stew." There's not even give me a glass of milk. There's just, "I want to go see him." So it looks like they have done away with the, getting healed makes you super hungry to replenish all the energy that your body used. Looks like they're doing away with that. It's a small change. Is it book accurate? No. Is it probably a good thing? Yes, because if every time somebody got healed, if you had to keep hearing them or keep watching them eat, it'd probably aggravate you. Maybe they'll bring it back for like really, really big healing, like they, will. Hey, spoiler, like they will with Matt with the dagger. Maybe they'll bring it back for that to give them a reason to stay somewhere. If they go that route, like where it's in Tar Valon again, maybe not. But at least for right now, it looks like that is gone because she walks with Kareen to go see the Dragon Reborn. On that note, where are they holding him? Where is he being held at? Because there's these monoliths out there and on the inside too that have this writing on it. But what is this place? Matter of fact, I want to hear your fan theories below in the comments. Where the heck are they? Alright, so let's just look at this for what it is. This whole episode, for the most part, revolves around the interactions with Logan and everything. And this is a big departure from the books. This does not happen in the books. Yes, he gets captured, but Moraine never, has the wound after Shadow Logoth and goes and finds. She's still journeying, trying to find, all the Two Rivers Emon Field folk, not, at the Aes Sedai camp where they're taking Logan to Tar Valon. So that's definitely a new departure, but it's not one that I'm mad at, honestly. It's got some great scenes, some great character development, so I'm good with it. I hope you are too. Let's continue with this breakdown. So one of the things that I noticed in here, aside from those pillars with the writing, is some of the interactions and some of the way that specifically channeling is working. So if you watch as Moraine is doing her shield, this doesn't look like it's weaving, yarn, kind of how I always pictured in the books, but it does kind of look like, an abstract, very old cobweb or web, which is very similar to how Lews Therin would describe it in Rand's head in the books versus, Rand always like, not web, weave. So that's very interesting how that kind of played out. It does look like the mechanics of shielding work a little differently. But that is what it is. We'll get to some of that here in a little bit. I think one of the things that was really smart and really telling was Landon, looking at Moraine and going, yeah, you would have liked our plan. We snuck up when he was asleep and shielded him then. That is extremely smart because they're talking about how powerful Logan is. And you see later on that it's powerful to shield him, or it's very difficult to shield him when he's actively holding the power. So if he's sleeping and not holding the power, it's a little bit easier. Probably a lot easier. And that's how they were able to get it done. So good on that. And also good that she's kind of alluding to what she says later with like blues. They're basically just a bunch of little, flittering spies. Talking about how this is kind of a sneaky, underhanded thing that they had to do, and Moraine would have loved it. So it was a good little subtle character thing there that I liked as well. Additionally, once Moraine gets that shield in place and Landon lets hers go, which again kind of floats away like cobwebs that have been dusted into the breeze, Moraine's face, Rosamund Pike does a wonderful job. Her face just, ooh, it's like getting kind of hit in the gut, but you know it's coming, but it's a little harder than you expect. You're like, ooh. That look was just phenomenal. So that was very good. Cut away from there where Corinne goes back to her tent. She's having her conversation with Stepan. Stepan, for the first time, kind of confirms the theory I was talking about, which was that, yeah, it's probably the Red probably did steal that guy at the cold opening in first episode, because he's saying rumor has it that the Reds are stealing people outside of the tower all over the countryside. So first mention of that, still think that's going to come into play later since Moraine saw Landon do that, or at least that was the implication. So the next part of this that I really found interesting was as Moraine and Alana are sitting there talking, and there's a lot of interesting things that goes on there. First of all, they got the bells in Alana's hair, which is wonderful. Arafellin, they got the bells in the hair. Good choice there. I like that. It's given that good, throwing the flavor from the book into the series, which is something that's going to need to do, especially if they depart too far from the actual material. They got to keep those kind of things in there, especially when it doesn't take any time away from the storytelling. So good there. But there's an interesting fact, or an interesting thing that happens here. And the first one is that Moraine says, I know that we can't see men's weavings, but it's so weird to know that it's happening and stuff. Well, it shouldn't be if he's shielded. He can't weave if he's shielded. So I thought that was just a line that kind of, maybe saying something like feeling somebody trying to draw upon the power when you can't see it is what they're trying to allude at. Just the line seemed a little kind of off to me based off of what the canon of the books, and I think the canon of this series for the most part, is. And we're going to get to that for the most part later on in the video. Another interesting fact is you can tell there's a few times throughout the episode where Logan basically is flexing. He's flexing his channeling power to try to break out of the shield. And why this is interesting is he always does it at moments when the Aes Sedai are distracted because they're discussing something serious. It always happens that way. But if you remember early on, Lyanna says, no, we plugged his ears with flows of air. So this is going to be my big theory for this video right here. I think she's telling the truth, but I also think that she didn't tie off that weave. So, maybe it's one of those that, when Alana was distracted, she kind of let that weave go away. It would seem very much in play with her. If you're wondering why she would do that, it's so Logan would know when to try to escape. So, because if he escapes, they can shield him without the need of without breaking the 3 oaths or without, threat of Tower Law, because he's now an active threat to the lives of the Aes Sedai and their warders. So, I think that might be the case, because she says that she plugged his ears with weaves of air, which means he shouldn't be able to hear anything. But there are times when he looks almost like he's listening, and there's times when whenever he tries to kind of break out of the shielding, it is a time when they're having serious discussion and are clearly, not paying attention. Which the interesting fact with that is, he has his eyes closed, so he's not watching. Cut, and we get to see a different scene where we start to see Rand and them, Rand, Matt, and Tom Rellan trying to travel, and they come across a farm, and they're talking about, hey, let's stay here for the night. But just before that, Matt's horse kind of rears up and everything and fights him. And then when they're down talking about this, it's kind of fighting him just a little bit. But pay close attention to when it's fighting him. So in the first scene, that it kind of, rears up and he's riding it and he has to ride it in a circle, there's nothing really there to make it happen. It's definitely probably Matt. But the second time it happens, Tom's talking to both of them. Matt's on one side, Rand's on the other. Rand turns, takes one step while he's saying something, and that is the exact point when he takes a step towards Matt and the horse that horse pulls back. So again, that's that hint that, hey, come into play later on. That's a little bit of that foreshadowing you got to kind of look back towards when they do it. So we'll get to why that's important here in a minute. Nonetheless, this is the Greenwell's farm. So if anybody remembers Elsa Greenwell and them, this is their farm. Actually, the little girl at this farm on the subtitles named Elsa. In the credits, named Helga. So I don't know if they went, oh crap, this is way too young to be Elsa, or if that was just a mistake somewhere, or if they're going to have an Elsa later. I don't think so, because it looks like everybody that would have been there would have been at the farm. I don't see why they would have had the daughter away unless she's already in Tar-Valon, because we know that she's there later in the book series. So we'll see. Nonetheless, this is the Greenwell's farm. After a little bit, I thought it was very clever that Rand, is noticing that he doesn't have his bow with his fingertips. He's got it with his fist. That's something that anybody who shoots a bow a fair amount, especially those who hunt with it, know that when you're ready to kill something, you're pulling back. It's kind of like putting your finger on a trigger on a firearm. This is the I'm ready to fire. So that was very interesting that he's the one that caught that. Nonetheless, everything goes okay. But Rand is definitely showing some mistrust towards Tom throughout these scenes as well, which, again, is important later. There's also that pretty cool scene between Nynaeve and Leander, where Leander's walking up trying to talk to her. That's actually what it cuts away from to go see the boys walking up to the farm. But then it cuts back to that, and she's talking about, the blues are nothing but little flittering spies. And she's like, well, the red's any different? And she's like, yes. We protect the world from people who would abuse the power. Even other Aes Sedai. Talk about foreshadowing. All right, now to talk about Perrin and Egwene and the Tuatha or the Tingers. I covered them a lot more in the previous episode in my spoiler-free breakdown, but just some little things about this that I thought was interesting outside of my generally actually liking the way they did the Tuatha in this episode versus how they introduced them in last episode. That is, the Aram makes a very, Aram, however you want to pronounce it, makes a very telling thing. He says, we normally wouldn't come this way. He's talking to them, they're saying, well, how do you know we weren't, thieves or bandits? He's like, you'd be bad. You were walking across, the Caroline Plains in rags, you have no gold. He's like, actually, we normally don't come this way, but there's a bunch of shoulders to the south that made us have to change where we would normally travel. And I'm wondering, could that be, in fact, Perrin and Egwene are there, could that be Ta'veren work? Because they've clearly said, there's all these Ta'veren, more than just the three guys, more than just the Rand, Matt, and Perrin. There was, I think she said 5. Ta'veren, she may have said 4, in Emond's Field. So, if that's the case, Egwene's probably Ta'veren too. So now you have 2 of them traveling alone. I wonder if that would have been enough to, maybe some of these soldiers that are trying to escape the war, Powder might weave them so the Tingers have to change their bearing and meet up with Perrin and them. Who knows? Just a thought to think of. That's a little theory too. So another thing on that, we finally get a great description of the Way of the Leaf. Oh, it was so good the way that she explained it. It was very book accurate, so loved that scene. So let's go back to the Greenwell's farm. Matt and Rand are mucking out the stables while Tom's sitting there drinking something. It's probably tea, I'm sure. So he has to stay fresh for his performance. But, clearly Matt's kind of tired. He's like, I need a break. He puts it down. He goes over and, pretty convincingly throws up on camera there. But then you see that black, that Mashadar corruption, we'll say. The evil of Mashadar, like you saw in Shadar Logoth, kind of seeping into the ground and potentially corrupting the area there. Then you also see it crawl back into his mouth, showing that he is clearly infected by the evil presence of Mashadar from Shadar Logoth. But right after that, he meets, Helga / Elsa Greenwell right then and there, and there's that a cute little discussion, and she offers him her Brigitta doll, and I love the fact that it was, it wasn't Bridget, it was Brigitta. So I had an argument for a while with a buddy of mine on how to pronounce that, and I think I was the one that was wrong. It was really early in my book reading series. He's like, just look in the back of the books, and I was like, oh crap, I'm wrong. But I was happy to see that there, braid and all, and interesting thing. Think about what she says. This is one of the bigger Easter eggs I thought in this episode. You can keep Brigitta. She protects me when everyone's asleep. Where's Brigitta found in the books? Teleron Riad, in the world of dreams. What does she do? Before she gets ripped out of there, she's protecting Nynaeve and everyone while they're sleeping. So, oh my God, such a great Easter egg there. I'm getting chills just thinking about it, going, is that one? That was a masterpiece. So while Matt's over there doing that, Rand and Tom are having a discussion. Tom's like, he's showing all the signs, boy. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I knew someone like him. My nephew Owen. He was fine, until he started to kind of turn. He became really suspicious of friends and family and people he knew, of just anybody. Horses, not horses, but animals, reared up and skittered away when he was around. No one knew what was wrong until he threw a rock without, using his hands. And it was this whole thing like, oh, these are things that happen to people to men who are starting to channel. And he's applying them all towards Matt, because Matt is doing all of these things. There is all those things around Matt too. But notice, it's also around Rand. Now, for those of us who have read the books, know that that's because Rand can channel and Matt has the dagger. That's why they're showing similar things. It's probably has a lot to do with them both being corrupted by evil, although very different evils. One being evil of the Dark One, the other one being a different type of evil. I've always considered that to be the evil of man. That's just always been my opinion when it comes to Mashadar. That's the evil of man there. Whereas the Dark One that's the Dark One's more pure evil, or a different type of evil. Nonetheless, Rand is being suspicious of people. He's being very suspicious of Tom right now. As they're walking up. Why is this Gleeman doing this? Last time we saw him, he stole our money. Matt said, we worked it out. And then what if he killed her just to get us to gain his trust? That's not the way Rand thinks. That's the way Matt thinks. And Matt's like, that would be smart. There's hope for you yet. So that's very telling. And then that horse thing, the first time Rand wasn't near him. I mean, he was walking behind him, but he wasn't gaining. But the second time it rears back, and it's not rearing, but it's pulling away. It's pulling away as Rand takes a step towards it. So I think that they're showing that that's Rand. And like I said, I think he channeled right there in episode 3. So, to get out of the Ironwood door. Actually, I don't think I've done that breakdown yet, but that's coming soon. That's one of the things I noticed. Going through that door, you see kind of like there's a shaky cam effect that makes you feel like that's more than just his shoulder. He's tapping into some unknown power at that point in time. So interesting there. I think that's what they're trying to show, is that he can channel as well. Before we go to the other scenes, let's go ahead and finish up the things that you see at the Greenwell farm. So eventually they go to sleep, and Rand has that frickin' dream. So here's what I've picked out from the dream. It looks like it's in Emmonsfield or the Two Rivers, whatever that town they're from, and it looks like it's winter or there's ash raining from the sky. That could be because things have been caught on fire. I don't know, one or the other. But Rand's walking up, and the first thing he sees is Perrin with the big blacksmith's hammer, the big one, just hammering on something. And if you look, it's a body, it's a female, has a braid, and that wedding ring on. This is his wife, Layla. So, kind of disturbing imagery there. And obviously he's covered in blood. As he passes, you see Matt gaining on him, holding out his hand. And you can see that it's just covered in blood. Now, there's no eye in it, so don't think that I'm going there. But it is red. It is a red hand. So, potential foreshadowing there. And then it cuts to Egwene, who's just standing there calling for Rand. And then you get the jump scare for the episode where we're going to call him Furnace. No, you know what? Where Balsamon pops up from behind and grabs her, and then, does that furnacey scream at Rand. The more I'm seeing of Balsamon, the more I'm okay with the design. The first time they showed him at a distance, I thought he looked terrible. Just like wet garbage. But the more we see of them and the closer up we see of the face specifically, starting to like the look of him more. Then Rand wakes up with Tom going, I got you, boy, I got you. Shit, where's Matt? So they immediately are like, shit, let's go to the farmhouse, see if he's there. He is. But they don't see him initially. They see dead bodies. And then there's Matt just standing there with their back to him. And you're like, oh, here it is. Here it is. And then you see Mashadar crawl up into his mouth. And he goes, I see you. And holds up that dagger. And then from the shadow comes the Fade. Fight ensues. You can definitely tell that the Fade's the one that killed everyone because it's got blood on its sword already. You know, Matt's dagger's clean. So it's showing you as a, this is that visual storytelling. Hey, look, it is the Fade that killed him, not Matt. You got to kind of be eagle-eyed to catch it, but it's there. So Tom Morellan stays behind and fights off the Fade as the boys, take off, get on their horses, and leave. That portion of this is very book accurate. So they're keeping some of the things in the books. They're just moving them to other areas, which I'm actually kind of okay with. Before I move on to the next scene, there was one thing that I forgot in that last scene. It's when Tom's explaining to Rand all this stuff, and as I'm a Gleeman, I told him this. He's like, you seem to know a lot more than a simple Gleeman. He's like, yeah, because that's what we call ourselves, because people with knowledge are scary, so we make a funny name. It's because he's not just a Gleeman. We'll find out later, but they're already showing that, okay, Tom's not going to be just a Gleeman in this. Alright, so now you see both Moraine and Kareen are holding the shield. Alana's getting her rest time. And I want you to notice the way that they're sitting and the different looks on their faces. Kareen to me, she screams duty. I am doing my duty. Whereas Moraine is very intent and driven towards a goal. I mean, just the way she's sitting, her arms aren't on armrests, they're straight down, and she's just very intent and driven in a direction, but I don't think that direction is necessarily shielding. She's not looking at the duty, she's looking at a goal beyond the duty. Whereas Kareen is very much, shielding is my duty, this is my duty to shoulder, I am doing this duty. Just kind of a really good moment there that I thought was subtle, but really good to kind of just show the difference between the two characters. Also, alluding back to, they're not talking at all, which alludes back to the conversation that Kareen had with Stefan earlier in the episode. So a really good scene with Nynaeve eating with the warders actually having a drink or two, which comes into play later, and just showing that a lot of the other warders are a lot more loose and laid back, and that would make sense, especially considering the fact that these are not just warders, but that they are Green Aja's warders. They're a little more laid back, they're a little more, fun-loving, which I kind of enjoyed. And if you notice, Land doesn't smile nearly as wide as them. They'll tell a joke, they'll be smiling big, and they'll laugh a ton, and then he might have a bigger smile, but he's not like out loud laughing. There's no lulls from Land, from Alan Mandragoran. So I thought that was really good character development. I like the Nynaeve prudishness of like when a couple of the warders go off, she's like, they're not, going back to sleep in the same tent. They're just kind of like, yeah, they are, whatever. So I like that little Nynaeve's naivety and prudishness that she kind of had in the book, kind of showing there. Interesting that they're still kind of going with this, do they or don't they between Land and Moraine, because Land's like, yeah, I'm getting kind of tired too, which makes you kind of like the other guy's like, yeah, we're getting real tired, we need to go to bed. And then Land kind of seemed up doing the same thing, but I think he's really just feeling that Moraine is exhausted, so he's going as well. But to an outsider looking in, it's like, oh, they're trying to say that maybe they're together. I don't think that's the case. I think they're implying that to trick the audience. I think that's a misdirection, and that he's really just sensing that his Aes Sedai is truly just exhausted. I mean, think about it. She's been hurt, she got healed, and immediately took up a shift after being healed of, holding Logain's shield. So she is truly exhausted. But that conversation they have in her tent, very good, very telling. I think that one of the more interesting things there is Landon immediately walks in, he's like, he's 10 years too old. Well, yeah, but the Dark One's not after him. Well, how do we know? Oh, the dreams, the Trollocs. Harkening back to things that are happening. The Trollocs showing up at the Two Rivers, the dreams that the Edmunds Fielder / Two Rivers folk are having. He's pointing these back out to her to like solidify her resolve that you're on the right path. Don't deviate over to Logan. That's not who it is. But then they had that really cool line of, I don't think the Dark One knows any more than us. And Land's like, I don't know if that's comforting or not. Good choice there. Another subtle Easter egg in this scene that I really like is Land looking at her and going, I shouldn't have had that drink. You always get emotional when I drink. Great little nod to book canon when it comes to Warder's and Aes Sedai, that bond goes both ways a fair amount. And like if Warder gets drunk, as we see with Brigitta and Helene, that Aes Sedai can feel drunk. So he had a drink. She doesn't drink. So she got emotional, which is an effect that some people have. So I thought that was a really good nod to the book canon. One more thing on the Tinkers is Rita Kennedy is just playing Isla beautifully. The held back emotion with the slightly teared but not crying eyes is just so good and is an absolute delight to see in those scenes. So cutting away from that, though, another thing that I was absolutely delighted to see is a lot more old tongue than I expected, especially out of Nynaeve, who spoke it actually really, really well. I'm not going to go and read verbatim what she says. You can always go back and watch the episode for that. But having that amount of old tongue coming in makes me really wonder if they didn't develop the old tongue into more of almost a full living quote language, similar to what Game of Thrones did with Dothraki and what Star Trek has done with Klingon. Maybe we get that level of the old tongue, which, oh man, talk about adding some fun, interesting things for things like Jordan Con or anybody who's playing like the Wheel of Time games. That would just be amazing if we actually got that. All right, now we get to the big, more climax of the episode, which is when Alana and Karine, or not Alana, Leandrin and Karine are in there shielding Lograin, and you see a little sparkle and some chimey sounds because Karine's wards just basically went off. They just, hey, I liked that it went off. It didn't stop anybody from entering, but when somebody crossed, it let her know, hey, somebody's coming in. There's a bunch of people here, whatever. That's how she got known. Oh crap, Logan's army's here. So I really liked that. It was also very interesting that during that interaction, when they're distracted, that again, that's when Logan breaks through the shield. So and it's right after, you have Leandrin explaining, hey, if he broke free, the three of us would let us gentle him, immediately. It's right after that he breaks out of the shield. So there's something going on there. I'm just saying there is something going on there. Leandrin, she set this up to happen. I don't think she expected Karine to die, but I think she set this up to happen. So it did. So earlier I was talking about there being 4 greens and 4 reds. That's partially because I was kind of trying to count all the different characters. I didn't know if there was going to be more than that, than what I saw on screen. But when Lyanna says, no army can get through 7 full sisters. That's when I was like, okay, you have a green and red in there, 3 and 3 plus moraine. There you go. So as this is starting to come and they're firing these arrows up towards the group of Aes Sedai and their warders, great thing, you see Lan step in front of Nynaeve immediately, already protecting her. They've already kind of started to forge that bond between the traveling, him, just kind of in the same way it did in the books with her sneaking up and then kind of the banter they have. So I really liked that aspect as well. So a couple things. I'm going to try to speed through the rest of this because this is a very long video and I'm I've only got another page worth of notes to go over. So let's start with what Alana does out there. Did she just kill with the 1 power? Did she use it as a weapon? No, she didn't. As a weapon, except for in extreme defense of my life, for the life of my warder or other sisters, she holds those arrows up there until the army gets close to her where it's truly threatening. And then she doesn't send them out at them because that could hit a stray person. She brings them straight down. They're also, in the middle of a battle, so their lives are in danger. So even if they were to do something a little more destructive, I wouldn't feel bad and say that they're breaking the 3 oaths because they're literally being attacked with people who are throwing spears and firing arrows and coming at them with axes. Speaking of coming at you with axes, you get to see Nynaeve again giving that shiv, and again just shiving away at somebody's stomach. It's like the third time we've seen her do it. She's vicious with that little belt knife that she has, so good on them there. Alright, so while that battle's going on out there, you see Moraine enter the cave. And she walks in and talks to Logan, and Mitchley is like, why do I need to believe that you're the Dragon Reborn? I don't think that question is her buying time. I think she's actually asking him that question. I think she's going to continue down that path, and potentially, I don't know what her end goal was with that, other than to see if that was him, but I do think that two things flip the way that Moraine acts. One, when he starts talking about hearing the voices and them trying to make him do better, that's what the wheel does. They spin us out to make him do better, to make us learn. You see Moraine's face shift a little bit, almost to a smile, like she realized, okay, I am on the right path. And then she stalls for time a little bit, and she's like, no, the wheel doesn't want, it's people that want. And he looks at her and says, well, what do you want? And she pauses for a second, and she sees Karina out of the corner of her eye starting to, wake up and pull in the one power. And that's when she says the whole, I want you to know that your power, that's the madness speaking, your power is but a trickle compared to what the Dragon or a flicker of a candle compared to the sun that the Dragon Reborn will be. That was her buying time, and that's when they all start to shield him. Now it's interesting, and this is what I was talking about earlier with them shielding Logan when he was asleep. Probably pulled that off fairly easy. If you see here, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for Three Aes Sedai to take him because he's already holding the power. Even in the books, it's harder to cut somebody off from the true power when they're actively holding it. And the more powerful they are, the more powerful the people need to be, and that's just a thing. So good on them for showing that, and actually, while they're trying to get their shield around him, that's when he decides to throw out the spikes of the one power, and Corine's the only one who really sees it coming and reacts. And her reaction is to throw shields up in front of the other two, because that's what a battle leader would do. They would try to save their comrades before saving themselves. Wonderful call out there. She does die because of it, and you can tell as it cuts to the battle outside that Stepan feels it. And he feels it almost to the point of letting someone kill him, but he sees that motion out of the corner of his eye, and he fights back and is clearly enraged by this. I love that little subtle nod to book canon they did there as well. So, hey, warders can feel it when their eyesides die, because he's immediately like, even when they get hurt, because earlier when she got knocked out, he's like, Logan, we need to get to Logan, go. And at this point in time, when she dies, you can tell that he feels it. So there's definitely that bond, like I said, that goes both ways. All right, so a couple things on this last scene. One, what is the writing? You guys see this writing? What is that? That's something else if you want to answer that one instead. Put that in the comments, what you think that writing on these obelisks is. But given this scene where Steph and everybody comes in, shields clearly work differently in this version of the Wheel of Time, World, Rand, Land, whatever you want to call it. They work differently. They actually have a physical aspect to the mechanics of how the weave works, apparently, according to how these scenes are playing out. And it makes sense for this style of storytelling. I'll say that. There's that little bit of me that's like, it wasn't in the books. It wasn't in the books. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't, but this isn't the books. And I think we all need to approach that with that. This is not the books. This is a TV series based on the stories in the books. Not every detail needs to be seen. Not every detail needs to be said. Some things will be changed. It's fine. It actually made for a really good storytelling element here. So Stepan's totally livid because his Aes Sedai gets killed. So he goes up and tries to, basically scissor Logan's head off with the axes. They get caught by the one power and are slowly going in, but he's still going to try to kill him. But he breaks through the portion of the Aes Sedai shield. Well, Logan's still holding the power. He's not completely shielded yet. So that power he has it, and once it breaks through the shield, he can then touch those axes with the corrupted portion of the power, Sidene, and channel them to break and explode, which is exactly what he does. And it takes out everybody except for Nynaeve, who is barely missed by an axe blade, by a piece of that axe, which I actually think is the piece of the axe that went and slit Land's throat. And I think that's the one you don't see the movement on screen, but I think that's the implication there. That's the piece that slit Land's throat that got embedded in the wall right next to Nynaeve. So now we're getting right towards the climax of the episode when Nynaeve's going up there holding, her hands over Land's, slit throat going, no, no. And if you notice, even as he's dying, Land is like reaching out and grabbing his sword. Great point there. Of course, Nynaeve, filled with, despair, anger, rage. She got angry, she can channel, and boom. Does she ever channel? The scene, I knew it was kind of coming. I didn't expect it to be that big of a explosive, display of power usage, where she's not looking, she's just screaming, and the weaves are going and healing everybody. And that's what she's known for doing. So just wonderful there. Great way of setting it up. I like the fact that, it undid her braid and you see like different strands of the braid flying up into the one power. Great. Interesting thing here, though. What does Logan say? Like a candle next to the sun. Why would he say that if he can't see those weaves? So they're implying that he can see her channeling those weaves, when Moraine was just saying earlier in the episode that they can't see men weave. So I wonder if that's something they're changing. I wonder if that's something they're changing because of maybe the corruption or something else. But it seemed pretty definitive to me that they're saying, hey, Logan can see Nynaeve channel the one power. So that's definitely a departure from the books, where much later we find out there's just a little bit of like a eerie feeling that they get, like goose pimples and stuff. So this is very different from the books in that aspect. Alana immediately starts shielding him and says, "Sisters, link with me." And everyone starts linking, and I like that because it was very book accurate in my opinion. This is kind of what I kind of thought that linking would look like. And actually when she gets ready to draw the power out of Logan, it even starts to weave a little bit in the actual more of like a braid style weaving, which is what has always been in my head canon. So really good there. But while that was good, it was kind of an okay visual aspect or aesthetic compared to the power being ripped out of Logan, looking like these two like, black, forsaken angel wings. I know I said forsaken, but fallen angel wings coming out of his chest as like two tears are falling from his eyes. It was just such a good cinematic moment they captured there. Wonderful job. Of course, it's done, and he's down there crying afterwards, and you get that look of just Nynaeve staring, giving us all side eye. So, Nynaeve side eye. That's Nynaeve side eye. Yeah, I'm going to keep that one. Nonetheless, guys, that's what I found in this episode. I know this has been a long video, but there was a lot to cover because it was a lot that was not in the book, but a lot that had references back to the book. So let me know in the comments what you thought of that. If you have any things that you guys noticed that I didn't cover. I'm very interested to know that. Again, where is this place and what is that writing? Until next time, have a good one.